Want the power of Claude Code or Codec CLI for absolutely free? Well, that's exactly what Gemini CLI is offering. But we all know that sometimes free means you get what you pay for. Is that the case here? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Gemini CLI is, how to run it, and where it fits in your personal workflow. Let's take a look. Okay, before we dive in too deep, I wanted to cover very briefly that I feel like there's a few different families of editor when we start talking about engineering editors, and Gemini CLI falls into what I'm calling the CLI editors at this time. What we're talking about, Gemini CLI currently works in the same space as Claude Code and Codec CLI. And really, it's supposed to perform exactly the same kind of duties. And the question today is, does it really fill that same space that these other tools fill? All right, this is an engineering video. I'm going to make some assumptions that you've seen a terminal, you know how to work in terminal a little bit. You're starting to look at least a little bit into how to start coding or something like that. So if you're kind of unaware of any of the moving parts I'm about to describe, I'm going to fly through how to get this stuff installed. Talk to your local neighborhood GPT. They're going to do a far better job than I can do here anyway. But very, very briefly, to get Gemini CLI installed, I've come out to the Gemini CLI GitHub repo. All you have to do is search for that. You'll be able to find it. And then I'm going to use one of these npm commands. And all that's really basically doing is allowing me to drop into a terminal, type in npm install Google Gemini CLI. And what it does, it goes out, installs all those packages globally so that I can always run them essentially. And then I can just type in Gemini to get started once it's finished installing. And it's finished. So let's start Gemini. And so now we actually have Gemini running. Congratulations, you've taken care of it. I wanted to start here so that you could see one thing really important. If you are starting with this, I wanted to show you, read this yellow message. You don't want to run this in your home directory. You only want to run this in a controlled environment. So basically create a code folder where you're willing to do something, or check out your code from GitHub, however you're working today, and only start it there. So I'm going to stop here and then move over to one of my code folders. And at that point we can run it. So we'll drop into Gemini in a piece of code that I wrote a while ago and haven't run in a while. And so now we're inside of Gemini, and it's time to kind of really just start to explore, what does Gemini offer? Is it similar to the other tools? All right, so the first thing it does offer is slash commands. If you hit the slash, this is very common amongst these editors. If you hit slash, you'll see a series of commands. I'm going to use the up and down arrows to move between these commands down here. These different commands are things that we can run to kind of change the system or take action inside of the system, of course. The one that I'm going to show you now, because it's something we needed to do in the very beginning anyway, is auth. So if we go to auth, you're going to need to do this. And in fact, if you run it for the very first time, it may automatically do this for you. But at any given moment, you can just run the auth slash command and it'll ask you, do you want to log in with Google? Do you want to use an API key? Or do you want to use Vertex AI? Now I'm going to use login with Google, which will bring open a browser, allow me to log in and come back. Pish posh, we're good. But this is how you're going to get started. And really, honestly, I'm running all of this without any subscription with Google itself, Gemini. So this is really on a truly free account. If you have a login, if you have Gmail address, you can use this thing, and really that's its major value add at the moment. All right, so let's get logged in. Okay, now that we're in, we're authed. What can we do to see what it's gonna be able to do for us? There's a very common command. If you see init, if I type in /init, it'll say analyzes the project and creates a tailored gemini.md file. And what it's really doing with this file, it's kind of an important step to take if you're new in this environment, is it will go and look around the project and say, okay, I see how this project likes to work. So what I will do is I will write all this stuff down so that every time they start a new chat, I'm going to put it into that chat. You won't see it, but it's something that's going behind the scenes for you automatically every time you start a new session or something like that. And that means every time you talk to the LLM, it has a clue of what the project looks like, what it's about, and how it works. Okay, and just for fun, let's take a look at some of these slash commands very, very briefly and say you can auth, you can ask about the product itself. This is Gemini CLI, of course. Clear is a really important one. I want to point that out for anybody that's really, really new. This is basically start a new chat. But the fun one down here that I wanted to show is Corgi. Of course, we're going to turn on Corgi mode. If we select Corgi, what we get is this cute little Corgi dog down in the bottom here. And maybe we'll keep an eye on him and see what he's up to. But That's just a little Easter egg for fun. It has no real effect other than giving us a friend to code with. Okay, let me call out probably the biggest feature of Gemini CLI. It is free. And I wanted to point this out very specifically. There is a lot of usage that you get. You get 1,000 requests a day and 60 per minute. And this is kind of interactions with the model itself. Gemini 2.5 Pro is a model that came out in kind of preview back in March and really released, I believe, in June, somewhere in that neighborhood. So weirdly, that means it's a little bit older. 3 months, that's a big problem. 4 months, you're aging out of use. 2.5 Pro used to be my go-to model, and it was a fantastic model for a long time. It is still a fantastic model. Nothing has changed about that. It's just that some of these newer models, not surprisingly, have moved forward a little bit and have increased really what we expect from these models. We still get a 1 million token context window out of the 2.5 model, which is fantastic. And Gemini CLI can take advantage of all of that, whereas something like Cursor cannot. Even though you might be able to use these models with Cursor, you're only getting a 200K token window unless you use the max mode where you have to pay for things. So just be aware, these things are different. It's one of the things that these CLI products are doing is giving you raw access to the models, unlike some of the controlling systems that have their own costs that they're trying to manage. In any case, it is absolutely free. Everything we're doing here today is free. I'm not doing much at all, but at the same time, if you pull this down and just run a couple tests with it, you'll see, yep, this is fantastic. It's super fast, it's very performant, and it actually is free. All right, so what's one of the best things to do with these things if you're just getting started is I am going to open it up. This is an old project. I haven't touched it in a couple months, and I needed to explain the code base. I needed to kind of look around and figure out what's in there, and it comes back, it looks through all the files, and it says, sure, I can tell you what this project is all about. And it tells me that it's a full stack web application designed for AI-driven interviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That looks pretty good. One of the things that I'll tease here is I have my own version of Explain. Does kind of the same thing. You'll see entirely how this works, but I can run my own slash command. This is the hint. We'll see custom slash commands in a second and how to do that. And all I'm really doing is kind of the same thing. I drop into any repo with this and I can just select my own Explain and it fills it out in a format that I've decided that I want my Explain to always come out in so that I can see here's the basic breakdown, here's a deeper understanding of what it's doing, and the major parts, scripts and actions, those kinds of. That allows me to always get a formatted, structured output of what I want with just a slash command. Okay, so I started our application. Let's take a look at how the application runs and what it works like. When I drop in here and I run this, oh, okay. So the application, I haven't been in here in a while. Why on earth I checked in something that didn't work? I don't know. That's pretty frustrating, but okay. This is a great opportunity for us to use Gemini CLI and see if it can just quickly fix this or at least tell us what's going on. So what I'll do is I'll drop down here. I will go and grab the error that we saw and just drop it in and say, hey, can you help with this? And it says, I've corrected the URL. By the way, that was really quite fast. It says, I've corrected the URL. You shouldn't see those 404s anymore. And indeed, we don't. So now we're back to this version of the application. And it really is that simple and it really is that effective. The 2.5 Pro model is a really good coding model. Whether or not it holds up perfectly against some of the newer models, that's almost an unfair comparison. In fact, I've left Gemini CLI off a lot of my comparisons recently, only because of the 2.5 model kind of degradation that we've seen. It's absolutely a great model. For free, it is by far the best model that I've seen out there to use. So definitely give it a shot, but do understand that if you're coming from something like a Claude Code Opus, you have to do a little bit of extra work. It just doesn't quite get quite the same output as you might with Opus. Okay, let's explore a few very simple patterns here of let's clear, as we mentioned before, clear our session so that we don't have a previous context here, and maybe show you a fun one that I wish the others had is they have a /stats command, which at any given moment can tell you kind of the state of the session, which models you've used, how many requests you've done, what the token output looks like, a bunch of really important messages here. Really valuable and worth looking at. So you can kind of tell, where am I theoretically in my allotment of calls that I can make over a given day. There's also another very interesting command in here that you can change directories. You can say manage workspace directories. And when you go into directory, you can either show the directories that this system allows or already includes, or you can add. So if I say show, you'll see that it is including this one directory. And if I do add, it will say, sure, you have to tell me the path that you want to add. And what's cool about this, that is not something I've seen in the other editors at this point, is let's say I have a system that has its server component in another project or another folder, and I only want to work within 2 or 3 little folders and not a whole mono repo folder or something like that. So this one has an easy way for you to say, sure, you want to create something that has multiple root folders to it, essentially, can do it just fine. Super easy. Really cool. But there's another one that I think is really neat and others need to get into, which is settings. So in this settings, if we run that, you can see here's all the different settings that you can choose within the product itself. And if we move down, there's a bunch of different settings that you can choose to change right here within the editor itself, rather than only going to that settings folder, which we're just about to do to show you some of the more advanced things. But it's really cool to have a way to do this right here. I think that this is something that a lot of these editors really need to move to and make it more obvious how to make some of these changes, because a lot of this stuff is still diving logs and figuring out the right commands to put inside of some TOML file or something like that. It's a little bit messy. Also, it will allow you to change these within your user environment, workspace environment, and system environment. And I can't say enough about that. This is one of those things that Codec CLI is still dramatically missing. Claude Code got it right out of the gate. This is you can have something within the project itself, or you have things in your users files, or any other locations. There's quite a few locations, as you can see, that it looks through the workspace itself, the system, or the user level. And that holds when you're doing project level changes as well, like slash commands and things like that. So that's really neat that you can do things that are within the project, can be checked in and shared between other developers, or even just checked in for you to use later, because this was a command that I really liked running against this one project. I need to save it, but I don't want to have it global and it's in every project I ever use. That doesn't make sense. So this is a really neat feature and just kind of hints at their broader expectation that there's going to be multiple engineers on a project and there's going to be multiple projects that you'll be within. Good thing. Okay, one of the more exciting ones that I like is custom slash commands. Now, all of these seem to have some version of this. Codec CLI just released a version of being able to support custom actions or custom slash commands. These slash commands that we're doing where we hit slash, if I go to the bottom of my list, you'll see 2 special ones down here that have this little emoji that I use for my own items. And these are 2 slash commands that I've written and I've put into my environment that I can use anywhere. You can do these very easily. Let's talk about first where this lives and how it works, and also a couple of the other settings. To do that, we're going to leave this and I'm going to jump back into my home directory, and then I'm going to go to a Gemini folder. So there is a Gemini folder inside of your home directory once you run this, and it has some things inside of it. I am going to be using a new editor. You guys have seen me in the past use Cursor. I'm going to use an editor called Zed. Zed is an excellent editor. By the way, I probably will do a whole video on Zed itself. If you're interested in something like that, subscribe. But for now, what we're doing is we're looking at the files that were inside of this folder. We were just in this folder. I opened Zed at this folder. That's why it's rooting here. Easy. One of the things that there is this settings JSON. This is that basic file, the starting file of I want to add different things inside of my own implementation of Gemini CLI. So this says I've turned on checkpointing. I am using ripgrep, things like that. I have set a theme, so you can go in and select themes. Some of those things are being saved up here in this file. You can also add these files. All the files that we're talking about largely can be put inside of a project also. And so generally it will cascade those changes. It will kind of search upward in its directory structures to get to the settings that it's trying to load. Kind of a standard pattern, but I wanted to show that. The other thing is these commands. And really, again, this is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned at the ergonomics of a tool. If you create a folder called commands inside of your Gemini root folder, there's not going to be one there to begin with, by the way. You'll have to create the commands folder. You can put just any TOML file you want inside of that commands folder. We'll look inside of one of those in a second. They're TOML files, so they have a little bit of a different structure to them. I have created a subfolder. If you subfolder, you noticed my little emoji. That is kind of a lead on the names So the name in the slash command itself is the name of the file. Check_git, that will be the slash command. Explain was the other slash command that we've already run, but it started with pig nose explain. That's just to indicate what folder it came from. And to me, that's just to indicate this is one of my own slash commands. It's easy just to see it distinguish itself. All right, so with that, let's take a look at the explain one that we ran. If we look at the explain TOML file, the structure of a TOML file, use Z or some other editor. They know about TOML files. You can kind of do this very, very easily. But basically, you're going to need a description. That's what comes up when you're selecting it in the list. On the right over there is what the description is. It just shows it in that list so you know what tool and what they do. And the prompt is what executes when it's run. When it's run, this basically gets thrown into your context window and executed as if you had typed it in. Now, with that, there's a distinguishing characteristic here that makes this better than what Codec CLI today is doing. I sure hope that Codec at some point in the near future adopts this. Claude Code, of course, once again, 200-pound gorilla, already has this kind of stuff and does a great job. In here, you can include an args token. These double braces and args in the middle of it, anything you type in will go into this place. So if I had done /explain space hello world, this would say hello world. So they would just replace this whole token with whatever you typed. And then the rest of it flops in as well. And that allows you to kind of make a dynamic action instead of it just being a prompt library. Now, prompt library alone is pretty useful. So I'm glad that Codec CLI has it, but I'm really, really excited to see the way that Gemini CLI is implemented. They also have other actions and other tokens that you could put in here. Like you can have @ commands that will reference files within your environment. So if you wanted to say, make sure you include the information within @this file, it'll slurp that file and put it right there. You can also run bash commands with brace bang, and that way any bash command you can have it execute like a list, and it'll give you a list of everything in some folder, drop it into this location and say, structure this and tell me which one's the biggest file. There's a lot of neat little things that you can do inside of these action commands that you can't do inside of just a prompt. So great job here. I love this. The fact that you can do it at project level and at user level is super exciting and really shows that Gemini CLI is real. This is not a pretend version of this. The only thing so far that is kind of a downgrade or even a potential downgrade, though I wouldn't call it a direct downgrade, is the model at this. Okay, there's one last thing that I want to cover inside of the Gemini CLI environment itself as just a very quick pass over. So let's say that we wanted to change our main color back here to red instead of blue. If you recall, we have blue as our main color in the application. We can say change main application color to red. All right, it's going to look around. That's not obvious, I wouldn't say, but in fact, Gemini CLI is so fast at these kinds of things. It went in, it found it, it made this one change. Things are red already. You heard I didn't stop talking. That's how fast these things can be. Now, what I can do, and this is very different than others, is you can save a chat context. This moment where I am in this chat, I can save and say before huge change. And then what that gives us is later, if you want to resume that chat, you can come and hit this and it will load us back to this moment in chat history. Now, admittedly, this is not changing all of the files. They have a different restore checkpoint kind of thing. Frankly, I'm not going to show that to you because I have not been able to get it to work, but all of the facilities are in there to be able to save and restore things as needed. It just doesn't seem to work for me at this moment, so I'll just say work in progress. But the chat system does, but it works very different. It's not just here's a list of all of the chats and the times and the last time you were there. At any given point within a chat, you can say, hey, say the chat right here. Like you can save 3 different points within the same chat history and it'll be able to restore those 3 different positions, which I think is a different way to do it. It's interesting, and these persist for quite a while. So this gets stored and you can always come back to this chat history at this point. Now, admittedly, again, recognize this is not saving any of the files at this point. It's just this chat context. But sometimes this chat context is the hardest thing to recreate. So I thought I would point out their chat history system is quite different, but it's there and you get to put names to it, which I think is actually kind of a neat ergonomic touch. Okay, last item I wanted to show you because I think these are very neat. These tools are not meant just for coding, and they're not meant only as interactive coding editors. That's their first outlay, so it feels feels like that's all they do. But what I want to show you is you can use them as CLI kind of tools themselves. They are CLIs, which basically means a command line interface. So basically, you can send something into it and it gives it back to you. That's basically the concept. So I'm going to call Gemini with a -p, which says what follows is the prompt that I want you to run. That's an indicator to Gemini that we don't want you to bring up the interactive version. We just want you to send back the response. Send this to the model and send back the response to us as a CLI. And it says, hey there, how can I help you today? So we can also, unlike some of the others, interestingly, we can use the internet. What's the weather in San Francisco today? And is it typical? Format your answer for an 80 wide display. So this is a very neat thing that the 2.5 Pro model can do. 2.5 Pro can reach out to the internet. It already has that tool built in. But this is a very neat thing that you'd be able to use this inside of other workflows. And by the way, of course, it gives us a great 80 wide kind of display for this and tells us that there's a 10% chance of rain in San Francisco today. And it's going to be, summer, maybe 68 degrees. I know everybody feels like that's summer, right? All right, so this has been fun. Let's get a conclusion. Does this belong in your tool set? Okay, Gemini CLI, is it something that you should use? Absolutely. No, I have no reservations saying if you have any literal interest or capability of running a terminal and you have a Gmail address and you have any inkling of interest in doing something like this, definitely give this a shot. It is fully free and fully interesting. Gemini CLI has had like 1,000 updates since it released a couple months ago because it's an open source, truly open source project. People are churning on this left and right. And let me tell you, in that period of time, it has grown leaps and bounds. It is so much better as an editor than it was 2 months ago. So I really do think that they're going to reach parity very, very quickly, and we won't really be able to distinguish the difference between these things. It might be some of these considerations like, do we have project level settings? Do we have server level settings? Can you use multiple project files? Those kinds of things are really distinguishing characteristics suddenly. So it is absolutely on par with the other tools as a tool. The question is the model behind it. I believe that Google is out there cooking 3.0 right now, trying to figure out how to get that to us. I bet 3.0 is going to give us a really good coding version as well. And I think that will be the thing that turns all our heads back to Gemini CLI. So get used to it now. You may not need Claude Code. If you can get by with this for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months at the very longest, then I think you're going to be in great shape to be on the cutting edge again very soon. Gemini CLI, honestly, 2 thumbs up for this one. Great work. I will definitely be using it. Should you? Again, oh my gosh, is it free? Do I really have to tell you that? Definitely. All right. I really appreciate you coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.